Today's episode is with another extraordinary leader who happens to be a youth volleyball coach. Dale Casey shares what she's learned about building confidence, developing leaders, building culture, and creating healthy environments. Her honesty on how her own leadership style has evolved is both instructive and inspiring. I learned so much about the game and how she's doing more than just coaching volleyball. I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did.
Find a way.
Your approach to coaching and what you've learned, what the game has taught you. So there's so many things I want to talk about today.
Yeah.
Help me understand this love of what is it about volleyball?
I mean, for me, it's such a momentum changer. Momentum changes seconds. And if you can teach those girls and boys to keep their momentum and to stay positive, you can change momentum. And to watch a team go from 5 or 6 points down to 5 or 6 points up, it's just a fast-paced game that is so exciting.
I'm really curious about the momentum thing because the power of momentum in every sport I've ever been involved with, like whether it's coaching soccer or playing football or watching games on momentum is the X factor. And it's like, how do you control that? If you can help control momentum, it's a pretty powerful thing.
Well, volleyball is a game of errors. So the first thing we try to teach young players is to always have a good positive attitude, because the first time when you start making errors, if you let that get the best of you, you're done. The momentum never comes back, especially because it's a team sport. You rely on other players.
So with baseball being a true game of errors, right? Because in baseball, 30% success is successful. And then you take a sport like other sports where it's not a game of errors. Where is volleyball in there? Like,
it's high.
So it is. So
yes.
mistakes and misses are a part of the game.
Yes.
And so the confidence that dictates the momentum.
Oh, absolutely. And if you can teach, you can have a top team with all kinds of talent. And if they don't have the right momentum and attitude towards positivity of the play, they won't succeed. You can take another team that's half their size, half the ball control, and if they've got positive attitude, and they'll win.
Just thinking back to college, we were big. The soccer team was big supporters of the volleyball team, and we always made a little bit of fun of them because after every point or every miss, they'd come together and do a rah-rah thing. Yeah. That is not soccer culture, but it is volleyball culture. And is that
we make them? Yes. Yeah, because it's a game of errors. You have a setter that's similar to a quarterback. You have a libero in defense that runs your defense. It's very important that you have a team that has cohesion, that it has a lot of times you'll hear they just have to have a really good, they just get along well.
Yeah.
They get along well. If you have teams that are individuals and they don't get along and they don't play together, you're not going to succeed.
Sports, I've always believed, is a microcosm of life. Yeah. Like it's a highly focused, intense microcosm of life. And every sport is different. Just the culture of it and the way the game is played. Volleyball is very intense because every player on the court is involved in a very direct, intense way. And so like being a teammate and being a part of that team, to me, is different in volleyball than it is when you've got 22 players on the field in soccer.
Yeah, you can't be an individual in volleyball. You cannot. It's team oriented. It's how you feel. And if you're somebody if you have a player that's super, super good and they don't have a team atmosphere, it doesn't matter. They're not going to help you. They're not going to help you. So you really have got to make sure that your team is cohesive. They're one. They play as one. And it's super strategic. A lot of people don't realize that either.
Tell me about that.
So you teach your blockers to block a certain direction. You set your defense up around the block. So if you've got a hitter that hits really well down the line, you want to make her hit, you take the line away. You make her hit into the diagonal into your defense so that she can't beat you.
Who makes that decision? Like who?
The coaches.
But in the moment, who makes the decision of which way they're forcing the opponent defensively? Is that the blockers? Is it the libero? Take me into the moment in the court.
Well,
where decisions are made.
Right. Well, for me, and everybody coaches differently. I try to be part of my team. So I'm not just the coach. I'm also a member of my team. So I, in the huddles, will tell them what's going on out there. Tell me what you're seeing, what you're feeling. And a lot of times what I always try to say is, if I do my job correctly in practice, then I assist my team better by watching the other side and telling them where the holes are, where they're not covering, where to hit the balls. So, and not every team is that way, but your successful teams are because the coaches can do their job. So there's a lot of times the blockers will come in and tell me, I can't stop her. She's hitting line. I can't get over there. So we have to come up with another strategic way, whether we just say, okay, for the defender to take the ball straight on, do we move a player that's bigger? So it's nice when you've got players that are versatile. And if she's a little bit bigger on the outside and we need a bigger block on the right, do we make that switch?
Right. And because it's so intense, every player is connected, it seems like. And so those decisions in the game, which player, you described one of the positions as a quarterback. Which of those individuals, is there a leader in that? Is there a leader in that group that makes those decisions and has to communicate it?
Well, we hope to make a captain be able to do that. And a lot of times, if you've got a really good libero, which is your defensive player that wears a different colored jersey, they'll be able to tell you, hey, we need to close that block. We're not, hopefully we trained them well enough to be able to do that. But not all teams are that way. Some coaches don't know how to teach that.
Yeah.
So I try to.
Yeah.
I try to teach it to where you do have a captain. But I always tell my girls, I want to have 6 captains on the court. You may have one that can only speak to the ref, but I want 6 girls because it takes all 6 girls to tell me what's going on.
Yeah. Teams are better when they do have a natural leader out there, right?
They do, yes.
Yeah.
And you can tell it. And there's been times that my natural leader isn't playing so well. So I tell her, lead them by example. Just because you're not maybe hitting the shots or you're not digging the ball as well as you want to doesn't mean you can't still lead by example.
You've coached a long time. You've coached young players, and I think we learned so much about when we coach young players. And a lot of top coaches don't coach young players, and I don't think they have the full perspective. When do you recognize those leadership traits in a kid, and what do those indicators look like?
I usually see them starting about the 14.
Yeah, that
15,
late?
Yeah, they start getting a little bit aggravated on the court. Because still at 12 and 13, they're not really big enough. You got to get up over the net. You got to be able to control your game until they get up to a height or an ability to be able to control the net or to control the back row, read the ball. You got to be able to read if a hitter's turning the ball. You got to be able to read that. You can't react all the time. So for me, like my defensive players, it's great if they have a quick reaction because they can make some beautiful saves. But that's not going to get you through a good game. You've got to have a player that can read. They see where that hitter's hitting. They can see the block's not closing, and they move into that seam. So there's a natural ability to that. There's some players that come in and they're natural. You see it automatically. You think, oh my gosh, if I could just teach them how to read. Setters are the same way. You'll see setters come in with beautiful hands. They understand the court. They see the court. because you want that setter to beat the blockers.
Hmm.
You know, they need to know what hitter is up against which blocker.
Yeah. Well, it happens, the game happens so fast. Like I keep going back to the word intense because every moment of volleyball is intense. Where in other sports, like soccer is not, you couldn't do 90 minutes of continuous play intensely. So there's like it ebbs and flows, the pace of the game changes. Even basketball, you pace yourself over the course of the game. Volleyball, there's no pacing, is there?
None. And it can go 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got a game that's neck to neck and you've got to, you know, in high school and in college, you play the best 3 out of 5.
Yeah. The mental fitness is probably harder than the physical.
Yes.
To stay locked in that attention span in an intense game for that long.
Correct. And that's why we spend a lot of time mentally. You hear us tell all the girls all the time, or the players, just do not get down. Continue to play. It doesn't matter if you hit that ball out, and then it doesn't matter. You cannot let that blocker shut you down.
I hear you saying several things, and I think they're all really important. And I'm curious how you develop those traits in kids. The confidence you keep coming back to, and in a game of failures like this is, like the team plays an important role. But how do you, as a coach, build that confidence so that they can persevere through failure?
Well, you start off by letting them make errors. If they don't feel like they're going to get pulled every single time they're making an error, you'll start building the confidence. If you are positive to them, because I've never felt like a player walks out on the court and is trying to have a bad day. They're not trying to make errors. So a lot of times I feel like coaches, they don't mean to. A lot of coaches think, oh, tough love. It's tough love. I'm teaching them. And sometimes in each athlete's different. And I've spent so much time trying to accept each athlete for who they are, what they bring to me, and how I can make them better. And I spend a lot of time, like I'll make comments in my huddles like, don't listen to my tone, listen to my words. You know, don't take it personal. When I'm coming at you saying you're not getting to your spot, you're not moving quickly, your feet aren't correct. I also tell my coaches, because I spend a lot of time training my coaches, and I'm telling them, pick your fights. This is a disciplined game. And so when I'm in practice, I'm pushing discipline of technique, discipline of your footwork, discipline of your game. And I tell them that your practice should be harder than your game ever will be.
I don't think people who haven't coached fully understand how many things you have to do at the same time when you're coaching. And with kids, it's even more so, because you're balancing, you're wanting to build their confidence, but also hold them accountable, right? And recognize when they've made a mistake. And that's an art. And I don't think people understand how difficult that is, right?
Yes. I mean, I personally coach in my club. I coach the higher teams. I coach the 18 Power Open, 18 Club, 17 ones. Yeah. And I, every year, have a player that I look at them and I'm saying, I'm not pulling you out for errors. I'm pulling you out for no confidence. Because what they don't also understand is if they're in the middle of my game and they're unconfident, it throws the chemistry of the team off.
And you can't hide. You can't hide on a volleyball court.
No, you cannot hide that.
And, you know, I keep going back to soccer as a reference point, but in soccer, you lose your confidence, but there are no substitutions. And so in soccer, you lose your confidence. Well, you can hide. There's room out there to hide until you get your confidence back. Sports like tennis, sports like volleyball, there is no room to hide. And so you as a coach, you have to build that confidence. And it sounds like you do that through empowering the teams to build that confidence. Like you can't do it on your own. The team has to.
I can't force them.
Has to do that. Yeah.
I can't force them.
Yeah.
You know, I have to try to build that within them. And the way I do that is I discipline them on their feelings and how that's unacceptable. You not trying is unacceptable. You making errors are acceptable. But you not trying to go for that kill, or you not trying to close that block is unacceptable.
Yeah.
but you can err. You can be bad at it.
Well, they have to be free to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you grew up playing basketball, and one of just watching a lot of American basketball and a lot of American basketball coaches, that's one of the things I'm critical about of basketball culture is a mistake is made and that player is pulled off. I hear that from basketball players all the time.
They do volleyball too.
Yeah, like how you,
and then you're scared to go back in because you really believe that if you hit that ball out again or you don't make your serve, you're not going to get to. Now, I'm not going to say there's not a point that you say, okay, you're just your strongest point isn't serving, so we're going to have someone else serve for you.
Yeah.
So, but if you've got players, I mean, coaches don't even realize it. They believe it's tough love, and sometimes it is. You know, there is times that we have players come in on the coaching side, and I back them and say they have a bad attitude. No matter what you say, they roll their eyes at you. They're just not going to do what you ask them to do. Yeah. There's times that I ask players to make changes, and they just won't. They just won't. And that is a problem. It becomes a disease in the chemistry of the team. Yeah. So, you know, if you can make that team chemistry as one, and I start off my year every year with my new team, my new players, and I tell them, on this court, you're going to get along. You're going to defend each other. You're going to be sisters. I don't care what happens off the court. You don't have to like each other personally, but on this court, you're going to defend each other. You're going to be each other's back because you have to have a team atmosphere in volleyball.
You have influence over that culture as a coach, but you don't have total control over that culture.
I don't.
In your experience, who has the most influence in making, because we all want a team that supports one another, right? And it's a good chemistry. And I think coaches are able to move that needle. But in your experience, what are the most important factors in creating that?
For me, it's parents along with teachers and other people who see them on a regular basis. You know, I mean, I for sure don't always have maybe a coach that should have done all they should have because they're learning, because we do have young coaches. Sure. So I'm not going to sit here and say that my club is never error-free. Yeah. But I think as a society, we seem to let the kids get away with more. And so I see that in my club sometimes. I can tell when I have a player that maybe isn't as respected or is not as respectful to me or to my coaches, or, you know, and it usually, if a child is not respectful to an adult, that it's coming from a parent. If you have a child that's respectful to you, and maybe she's a little bit not so respectful to her teammates. Yeah. I don't think that's a parent thing, because if they're respectful to me, a parent's not allowing them to be disrespectful.
So it's like larger cultural trends beyond our control. It makes creating these healthy environments. Yeah. You feel like it's gotten progressively more difficult over your coaching career.
And I don't think it's just the parents that don't. I don't feel like it's parents that don't care. I'm a parent myself. Yeah. And there's times my daughter certainly has not been stellar. Yeah. I think sometimes the culture as a parents are very busy trying to make a living, trying to keep food on the table. And they sometimes just don't know. And then there's also coaches and teachers that are not respectful to them. Yeah. I do feel like we need to be respectful to our children and to my players. I respect my players. Yeah. I don't feel like they need to think that, oh, I'm in charge and no matter what you think. I talk to my players. I try to say, how do you feel? What do you think? And I try to respect them. So when I pull them off the court, they know why. I don't just say, get off. Yeah. I'm like, and I always tell them, you're not fired. Yeah. I always do that. I said, hey, get a break. I need you to go back in there. You're not fired, but we've got to fix what's going on out here right now. I need a different chemistry.
Yeah.
And then I always give them another chance. And I will continue to give chances as long as they are giving me the effort.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes to get that win, I do believe in winning. I'm very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
But it's taken me years to try to learn to coach individually as a group because everybody's different.
Yeah. It's another one of those balancing acts that I don't think people that haven't coached at a high level understand, like that balance between individual and group.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to do both. You have to do both at the same time. And in your sport, it's a intense, like I keep going back to that word of
It is
intensity. And you've got to do both of those things at the same time. Assuming over your career, you've gotten better at that.
absolutely. But I put a lot of work into it.
Yeah.
An example of that was, I guess it was probably 8 or 9 years ago. I used to coach. I was an intense coach. I was an in-your-face kind of coach because I thought that's how you should coach. Because I had coaches get in mine, and I had the personality that it didn't bother me as long as they weren't disrespectful to me. They could get in my face, yell at me.
As a player, you could play through that.
Yeah, but some can't.
Sure.
But
so you modeled as a young coach.
I did model that.
You modeled that from what you had seen basketball coaches. That's basketball
I was
culture,
in the basketball
right?
world.
Yeah, and so you model that.
I did. And I was watching, it was really funny. I was watching a video of myself because we were videoing the team. And it was from behind. And I got up and I got on my couple of my hitters pretty hard. And when I went back to watch the video, I saw how they reacted to me. And it didn't make me feel good. And I said, that's not what I'm looking for. And so I have a lot of conversations with my parents they say, oh, you can get up in my daughter's face. You can yell at her. It makes her do better. And I'll say to them, why do I have to? And they just look at me and I said, well, look at it my end for a moment. And they'll go, okay. And I'll go, that doesn't make me feel good as a coach to yell at a player. Why does my words mean any different whether I sit on the bench and I say, you didn't get to your base defense. I need you to get there and get to the perimeter and then move in. Than me getting up and yelling at her. Why is she not self-motivated? And it's so funny because you'll see parents look at me like they don't really have an answer. And I said, I don't want to go home mad or upset because I yelled at a child. That's not who I want to be.
Yeah.
I have some players that I may not be their flavor of a coach. I am disciplined. I will look straight at you and tell you what you need to do to fix it. I believe I'm fair. Yeah. But I will get on them. But I don't yell at them. I refuse to embarrass them in front of another team or a coach. If I have to discipline them, I'll do it in practice.
It's the win, right? Like when you hold them accountable is important. It's not always the how. It's like when do you confront a player? Do you confront them in front of their teammates or their families, or do you do it more subtly? That's an art, right?
Right. I mean, unless there's a discipline problem, I don't feel like I need to confront them. Now, I will say, if there's a discipline problem, rolling the eyes, rudeness, I will confront them right there because I think that it needs to be seen. That's not okay. That's unacceptable. Yeah. But if it's just a bad game, then we just say, hey, I just look at them and say, I still need you. I still need you out there and you can work through this. And because volleyball is a momentum, as soon as you start feeling good about yourself, your game changes. So just because somebody comes into the court and has maybe the first set is bad, doesn't mean that their second set's going to be bad. They need time. Yes. And I'm certainly not perfect on it, but, and I always have a player that challenges me. And what I mean by that is Their personality is different. I'm struggling coaching them. I'm struggling connecting with them.
Mm.
So I used to kind of I feel like if you get a really aggressive coach and you have a player that is maybe not so aggressive and you can walk on them,
Mm.
I feel like aggressive coaches take advantage of that without realizing what they're doing.
There's such a power imbalance,
Mm-hmm.
and I think coaches you have to be aware of that, right? Like,
and some aren't, and
Yeah.
I wasn't,
mm,
and so I try to pay attention when I get a player that I feel like is maybe scared of me. I'm the club director.
mm-hmm,
So I have some players that are automatically nervous of me when I walk in
mm-hmm,
because I have the power to put them on a team, take them off a team,
mm-hmm.
whatever. And so I always joke around and say I'm the principal. But at the same time, they're really, truly nervous of me. So a lot of times when I go to a tournament to watch them, because they also don't want to disappoint me.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to feel that way. I always try to tell them, you're not going to disappoint me unless you do something like as a human bad. And if you give me 100% effort, I'm not going to be disappointed in you. So I'll go to tournaments and I'll watch some of my teams from 2 or 3 courts away.
Mm.
So they don't see me because you'll see them look at me and go, oh my gosh, Dale's over there. Even my coaches do that.
Yeah.
And they're worried. And so
Well, you're coaching teenage
I am.
teenage females
Yes.
who are very self-aware. They're very self-aware,
And they're sensitive.
almost to a fault,
Yes.
right?
Yes. So I'm constantly battling this.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because then you'll see some of my 18s around me that have been with me for years. And they, in a humorous way, they're almost relentless to me. They're all over me. They're giving me a jokingly hard time. People see that.
Yeah.
I just sit there and shake my head and walk off. And, they'll be, doing something funny to me.
Yeah.
And so the girls don't realize that till they get around me, that they realize, okay, I am human.
Yeah.
And I do laugh.
It's another thing that we have to balance is being vulnerable, being a
Letting
human.
them see that.
But you're also have power and you're an authority figure. And so balancing that.
It's hard.
Yeah. And you learn so much like as you do it, like experience matters, right?
It does. And I try to experience my coaches. I try to help them. I've gone from, I noticed years ago when I was noticing the reaction players were giving me, that part of it was when I would stand up, I would stay standing up and I'd pace the floor. And it was making them so nervous. So I started sitting down. And then I'd only get up when I needed their attention. And it was so funny how quick I got it. Like as soon as I stood up, they'd look at me.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I could get my message across pretty quick. Like, hey, I need you to move over here. That girl's getting ready to hit line.
Yeah.
And I realized I was actually getting a better response. And so I started sitting because I am an aggressive coach. Now it's so funny because I'll get parents these days who think I'm not nearly as competitive because I'm not up pacing. But that's not the case. I have so much more I'm trying to do in this club. It's not just about winning. I want these girls to go on to college. And if I have a player that wants to play in college, we've placed them.
Yeah.
And so I try to teach them life lessons too. And part of my life lesson is that if you want this, you've got to figure out how to make this happen. And you've got to dig from within. And so I tell parents all the time, my huddles I try to reverse it and put it on them. This isn't about me. I'm giving you the information. I feel like I'm coaching you to a high level. But if you're not going to execute the things that we're training, we're not going to win. And I try to hold that player responsible for their executions and how they handle themselves on the court. Now, sure, there's some things that team is bigger, it's better. We were never going to win. And so I try to get them to understand, like, if you get a couple touches on the ball, you're already bettering yourself. If you can compete with them and you can pull off some nice plays, then we're already bettering where we were.
and I've learned, I played a lot of sports, and I learned each one of them taught me something differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like football taught me things that soccer would have never taught me, and vice versa. And one of the things in that football taught me is it's obviously an intense sport as well. And you have moments of lack of confidence, right?
Yes.
And there's nowhere to hide on a football field either. But what football taught me is like when you have those moments of self-doubt, you have to stick your chest out and just pretend it. Just fake it, right? Just stick your chest out, fake believing in yourself, and take responsibility. Even though you don't have the confidence, you have to take responsibility. I guess you don't have to. Like players make that choice. Either they step up and take the responsibility or they hide. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that youth sports teaches our kids, because life is like that too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have that conversation all the time.
Yeah.
Because that is where I hold a lot of my players responsible, is how you act on that court.
Yeah.
And the other side can't see that.
And it's not their performance, because you said earlier, it's not about the error. It's about
how you handle it.
Taking the responsibility to try, right?
Yes.
And not
giving up.
Yeah.
Because you're sad.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody likes to make errors.
Yeah.
And I make a joke with my players all the time. I'm like, if you ever play a game error-free, then I want your autograph, because I'm going to sell it and you're going to keep signing papers for me, because that means you're going to be a top player in the world. You know, we talk about all this time. If you could teach a player, here's another thing. If you could teach a team to play at their level, even when they're playing a team below them.
Yeah.
And that's another problem, is it seems like if you've got a really good team and they're not being pushed, they're not going to play at the level they're possibly able to play at.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people, if we could just bottle that up and sell it,
yeah,
every coach in the world would buy it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not on the shelf at Walmart.
No. Just to play at a high level all the time.
But I think also there's nothing worse than watching a girls' basketball team that is afraid to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Like it is pain. I don't know that I've ever seen anything more painful of a team just playing not to make mistakes. Because if you're going to be aggressive and you are going to take risks and you're going to be the protagonist, mistakes come with that.
Right.
Right? Like your players could get a serve in 100% of the time. Just get it in bounds, right? But if they want to attack with that serve, they're going to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. So the other way of looking at that is, if you're not making mistakes, then you're not playing aggressive enough. You're not taking enough risks.
Correct. Because we also call their serves. So the coaches will call. And for me, to keep my kids into the game, I actually make my captains call the serve, because they know more than I do who looks scared out there.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
So
you'll see little numbers behind their back calling a serve.
And that's not typically, it's typical for coaches to make those calls, but you're having your captain make the calls.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's whatever the coach wants, how the coach teaches.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll see some teams that the blockers will call what they're going to take away. What block, like, are they going to take line, so that they let their defender know that they're going to take the line away? So stay in the middle of the court. Yeah. They're going to force that hitter. I'm always wanting to teach the game. So I have my captains or somebody on the net, they will call the serve, because nobody knows the other side better than the players, because they're looking at them. Yeah. They're looking those other players in the eye. They know who's nervous.
Really?
Oh, yeah. If they're paying attention, they're like, we got that girl's number.
Huh.
And that's, I said, I also want to get the coach's side and say that there's never not a time you should take a player out. They do lose confidence. And sometimes it's just chemistry. That player at that moment isn't helping with the chemistry of the team. Mm-hmm. So, it is a fine line to be able to decide, when do you take a player out when you make a change. Sometimes you just have to make a change.
When you were a younger coach, did you make those serve calls yourself?
I did, and I still will.
Yeah.
I'll overrule sometimes.
Uh-huh.
So if I see something, if I happen to recognize something, and even the captains, it's funny, they don't even know that sometimes I'll overcall the server. I'll get her attention, and I'll give her a serve call.
Yeah.
But I also train my captains how to do that too. Like, it's so strategic. Like, if you've got 3 girls in the middle of the court and they're kind of stacking to switch to their positions, I teach my captains to call the serve over that, because it's an automatic block. It's a natural block of sight for the other side. So, it's very strategic, and you've got to know how to teach it. And I'm still learning. I still I listen to podcasts all the time. I watch high level coaches, D1s. I watch how they coach. They'll put up videos, and I'm constantly trying to learn. And the associations we're part of, they also have, online classes that we can watch. And and there's many every year. There's nothing that comes in. I go, oh wow,
you're learning something all the time.
All the time, and I'm trying to. And every girl that graduates from my program, and I truly mean it, I tell them that they have made me a better person and coach.
Yeah.
For coaching them, because every one of them's different.
Yeah.
Every one of them brings something else to my life.
Yeah. Every individual and every team.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, and I truly mean it.
Yeah.
When they leave, I look at them and I think, thank you for making me better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because some are more challenging.
Yeah. But you mentioned, like, there's a lot of, I think there's several parts of that's important. Going back to that environment that you're trying to create, there's so many pieces to it. Volleyball is a microcosm of life, right? Like in all our personal spaces and our workspaces, we're trying to create these healthy environments. And so who influences those environments? Like, the coach influences part of that chemistry of the team, of whether or not you empower the captains to make the calls or not. Parents have a part to play, for better or worse, be healthy or unhealthy. They're impacting that environment, right? And then you've got the leaders. The leader on that team has got to play an important part. And as a coach, you are empowering that. It sounds like you're empowering that leader. What have you learned about that over the years? Like, when you see a leader on a team, somebody with those natural leadership skills, what have you learned in terms of how to train and empower that girl? Well,
First of all, the coach needs to pay attention as you're training a captain or a leader, because sometimes they're trying to lead and they don't lead in the best way. They're a little bit more negative than they should be. For me, some coaches allow the team to pick a captain. I don't, because sometimes you pick your friend.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I pick a player or 2 players. A lot of times I have co-captains. And I empower them because of the way they play, that they show up, that they play with, how should I say, confidence. They're not followers. And so I will start to watch my team. And if I've got a follower, just because she's popular, doesn't mean I want her my captain. Yeah. I want a captain that's bold enough to look at you and go, we're not talking like that. That's going to mess his team up. And you've got to have enough guts to do that.
Yeah.
And I've had teams in the past that the captains haven't stood up. They knew it was wrong. And I've made phone calls. And I've asked them, did you allow this to happen? So
you held the
Captain's
leaders
responsible.
Yeah.
And they have come to me. They will tell me, yes, I did. And I'm sorry. And I'm like, that's okay, because I feel like that's my job, is to also teach you how to lead. And don't do it again.
Yeah.
Your job is to get their back, but also to lead them. And it's not okay if you've got a player or two talking about another player. Why are you not stopping that?
Yeah. I mean,
and coaches have to be careful, because sometimes I think they pick because they're the most popular. Most popular isn't always a leader.
yeah. Yeah. And I think teenage girls are prone to choose leaders that are popular,
Mm-hmm.
and they might not be the right leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that.
But also you also don't want to pick a leader that everybody dislikes because she's angry or she's rude. So you've got to pick someone but you can help them get respect. Like for me, I'll pick my captains, and then they are the liaison between me. Like I purposely will say to them, like, hey, have the girls there at 1 today.
Yeah.
And then they have to send that out. They have to pick the uniforms. They have to, and then I hold them responsible. For instance, I'll tell our tournaments, our 2-day tournaments, you either play in the morning or you play in the evening. So I hold them responsible. So like I'll tell them the gym opens at 7, whether we play or not, or we sit or ref, we will be there when the gym opens. That it's on you to make sure everybody knows. You don't need to call and text me tomorrow and ask me. You know.
Yeah.
If we play at the afternoon round, I want them there an hour and a half before it starts, whether we play or not, because if a court's open, a ref will start the game early. So it's funny because at first they're very intimidated by me, because they'll come up and I've already given them my instruction.
The captains.
Right.
Yeah.
And they'll come up going, okay, so you want me to have them here at what time? I said, what time did I tell you?
Yeah.
And they'll look at me and I'll go, and I just look at them. It's so funny. It's almost like an awkward silence.
Yeah.
And they'll go, you said an hour and a half.
Well, you're giving them responsibility. And
that's how you create a captain, because I need them to listen to them. I need them on the court. And I'll tell the captains, I need you to captain them through this. You're not just a captain who goes and calls the flip.
Yeah. It's one of the coolest parts of coaching is helping be a part of a kid becoming a leader.
Right.
Yeah. So, cause they might have the personality for it, but they don't have any leadership skills, right? It's like this blank slate of talent that has no idea how to lead.
They don't have developed. They can be mean. They don't mean to be, but they can be mean.
Yeah, they can use that.
And it's almost like a bullying. It's like they're not really trying to. They're trying to lead, but they need leadership.
But they don't know how.
Right. They need leadership to lead, help them. And the only way to do that is by staying a part of what they're doing. That's why I said I give my communications.
Yeah.
So the communication comes from me. And then because of times, I always try to make sure that I want an adult in that communication. So like I don't let them have a group chat that there's not adult in it, because we want to watch how it's, but I can't stop it.
Yeah.
I mean, the Snapchats go out there, and we all know the Snapchats you can't follow. And I've had issues with bad Snapchats.
Yeah.
And then no one can prove it.
Yeah.
Because it's gone. So we do try to, and same with the parents. You'll see parents will have a group, and if they don't like what's going on with the team, they start texting each other. I always tell them, go outside and walk by yourself and take a walk around and talk to yourself if you need to talk about somebody. But it's the whole thing, especially me as a director. I probably have more struggles as a director than I do as a coach, because I feel like the coach I can control. In directing, I can't control everybody. I'm not always on the court. I don't see what's going on with my 13s. I don't see what's going on with my 15s. And so, but I also want it to be a coach controlled environment, because I don't want my coaches to be afraid of me either. I want them to make choices on their own.
Yeah.
And so, and I want the parents to respect the coach, not me.
Yeah.
So I always call it a coach controlled atmosphere. But I do always ask my coaches to enlighten me if they're having a parent problem or a player problem.
What I sense is that earlier in your career, you modeled this aggressive coach that was probably
overly aggressive,
and probably pretty controlling? Is it safe to say that you were a lot more controlling when you were a younger coach?
Absolutely.
And your own leadership style has evolved to where you are empowering people with influence around you.
Yes.
And that is the captains. That's the coach. And that's something that's an art, right? Is
Yes.
how to empower those people. But you have to trust them first and be okay with them failing. Like
Right.
you've got young 13-year-old girls that don't know how to lead yet and giving them responsibility. You've got young coaches.
I have young coaches who sometimes won't give them the responsibility.
Because they're young and they're
scared
controlling like you were when you were
right.
22.
They don't think that they're going to do it.
How do you do that? How do you get young coaches to buy into that approach to empowering other people?
Just continue to work with them and watching them and talking to them more. Some coaches like it, some coaches don't. Some coaches thrive from it.
Mm-hmm.
Some coaches don't. Some coaches don't like me maybe watching them more or approaching them. I try not to embarrass them. When I'm at practice, I will ask them if I could. I try to be respectful.
Yeah.
And thoughtful. And like if I see something maybe not going the way I want it to on the court during practice, I will approach the court and I will ask them if I may help or can I say something? Because I want the players to have respect for their coaches.
Sure.
And realize that they are in control.
Yeah.
And so, and most of my coaches, all of my coaches, maybe I've had in 26 plus years, maybe one or two coaches that were like not going to have any of it. They didn't like it at all. And we didn't go more than a year.
Yeah.
They didn't return.
Yeah.
But in the most part, most of my coaches are more than happy to take my advice. But I have to tell you, I've learned a lot from my coaches. Like I'll watch them and go, wow, I didn't even think about that. And I'll use and steal what they're doing. I'm like, and I'll tell them, I'm like, I'm stealing that.
Yeah. Leadership is such an interesting.
It's a give and take.
It is. And it's also one size doesn't fit all. And so you're empowering your young coaches to lead, but you don't want them just to lead the way you lead because
they're not me.
That wouldn't be true to themselves, right? And so it's always something I'm really fascinated with is to see leaders who learn how to be true to themselves.
I think it comes from those coaches who respect you and mentor you, and you're their mentor. I mean, if they don't already agree with how you coach, and a lot of them, like for me, I've got a lot of coaches that are returners that were my players.
Yeah, that's cool.
And they already know how I am.
Yeah.
A lot of them I've coached, and they already know what I want and what I expect.
Yeah.
Some are coming back that they were my player when I was in my hardest. Like I was tough. And then I've got some coaches that are coming back that had me, what I always say, my better days. They've had me as a better coach. And so, and we giggle about it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, no, I was tough.
Yeah.
And I was trying to prove myself. And you know, and I hope that I can express how I've changed and why I've changed, but yet I still hold players to a standard. So I like the old coaching styles, a lot of it where the coach could tell you and not hurt feelings. I don't, in my club, it's so funny because I don't give awards in my club because I just don't believe in everybody should have an award. And I think everybody does a great job. I don't want to pick player of the year. I don't want to pick setter of the year because I think they're all doing their jobs. Yeah. So with that in mind, I want them to learn from within. I want the girls to be able to, we always laugh. I said, I want you to be able to be on the court and not have to look at me. Oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? So when I'm coaching them, I communicate why I want you to grab a ball higher. Why do you pass your ball off your hip? Why do you have a space between your platforms? so that they know it's an error. It's a contact error. And I don't think that I should have to fix everything. They should just already know. And a lot of times it's so funny because as I start to communicate the technique discipline, a lot of times they'll look at me and they're showing me what they did wrong. And I just giggle and shake my head because they already know.
Yeah.
And so I want them, and I'll tell them, I'm like, you can make a quick glance to see if I'm trying to get a hold of you for some reason. But what I don't really want is I don't want girls to mess up and then all 6 of them on the court turn around and stare at me, waiting for me to do something. Okay, you hit the ball out.
Yeah. Yeah.
You hit the ball out. It was a great swing.
Yeah. It happens so fast. They have to make their own decisions.
Yeah. And sometimes they have to be able to say that, but when they look at you for every mistake, they don't look at me when they do something great.
Yeah.
They make a great kill. They never look at me.
Yeah.
So why are you looking at me when you made a little mistake? Now, if you continue to do it, then I'll give you a fix. But okay, so you mishit it. You hit it off the side of your hand. Your elbow didn't come forward. You didn't get behind the ball. Okay, you should have already known that.
Yeah. But you give them the opportunity to. It's
them,
their game.
Again, it goes into a life thing.
Yeah.
Fix yourself. You know what you did wrong.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to have me. Now, where I try to get with them is like, if we're trying to beat them strategically, then I need them to look at me. So I will tell them, just give me a quick glance. Because if I'm trying to get a hold of the setter or the libero, so sometimes I may call a play in. And I don't want to have to get up and scream their name 10 times. And then you get their attention and then the ball served. And they're like, oh, I lost the ball. So I'll tell sometimes, I'll say, just quick glance. And if I'm not staring at you, move on with your life.
Yeah. Going back to the intensity of the game, you have to do all these things without being a distraction.
Yes. Yes. I want to be part of it. I don't want to be, it's kind of, we say the same thing with the ref. The ref shouldn't be the reason for the win or loss. They're just blowing the whistle. You know, they shouldn't be a reason. I don't want to be a reason. I want to assist them.
Yeah.
You know, so and when we walk off, and if we haven't played well, I don't chew them out. I want them to accept responsibility of the fact that they didn't do the things that we were training. I'll remind them in the huddle. Did you get to the perimeter before you moved in? Yeah. Were you set up in your block? Did you use the correct footwork to get over? And a lot of times they'll take responsibility. They'll look at me and go, we didn't. I'm like, well, then you live with the loss. And then we go back to the court and we practice that some more.
Yeah.
But I want them to walk off with that and say, oh, we just didn't do what we were trained to do. And that's the discipline of the game. You know, so for me, if you can discipline these players and you get a hold of a good athlete, but then you've got to let them be an athlete. You can also make it that you're so disciplined that they're robotic.
Yeah.
And then they don't know what to do. They don't just play with instincts.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take instincts away.
Is that a thing in volleyball? Do you see that?
You can.
Robotics, like coach controlled environments where the players,
they want everybody to look the same, they hit the same, they pass the same. I mean, I have the same desire for the technique, but I don't want Ella to look like Gracie. They're different players and they're built differently and they're different positions. Right.
Those environments that are like, I refer to them as like coach controlled environments where the coach is barking all of the plays and they just want them, the player's role is to follow orders. It's like we're stealing the most valuable part of the experience.
The love of the game,
the decision making, the responsibility, the freedom to make the wrong choice, but you made a choice.
And overlook it and say, okay, we should have thought about that.
Yeah, but you learn from it. And you can't make the right choice until you've made the wrong choice a few times, right? Yeah. It's like we steal that. Some coaches steal that from the kids. And the problem in soccer is sometimes that's effective and that's the easiest, that results in wins, but in the short term, right?
Right.
So like it might be the easiest way to win the game in front of you, but you're not developing a player who makes their own decisions. And I think our time horizons as we've coached longer and maybe live longer, like we think of things in longer time horizons.
Mm-hmm.
And as a young coach, probably put too much emphasis on the game in front of you, and you don't see that game as just part of this much larger process.
Yep.
So when you're talking about like developing a leader, you've got a natural leader that comes in and she's 10 years old, right? And you see some leadership skills there. That is not a 2-month project, right? That is a 8-year project to empower that girl to be a leader.
Yes, and it may be the different sport, but I typically don't see a leader coming out in a 10-year-old in
Yeah.
volleyball. And I think it's because they're too busy still trying to figure out how to play the sport.
Mm.
They're not very good at it yet.
Mm.
Very seldom do you get a 10-year-old that's really, really good unless they're living in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And then it makes you wonder if they're going to make it till they're 18, loving the sport.
Yeah, because it's too much.
My daughter was that person.
Huh.
I mean, she lived in the gym.
Yeah.
And she could take little hits when she was in
Yeah.
2nd, 3rd grade. And then she went through a period where it was like she could have moved up quickly when she was in 3rd, 4th grade and been with older girls. But she looked at me and like, can I just go back to non-travel to kids my age? Because girls haven't quite developed a leadership quality at 10, I don't feel. And if you see that in my world, it's rare. But I would take it and and try to develop it correctly. But you don't see it often because they're still trying to figure out how to play this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And girls, for me, if they don't know how to do something, they're not confident. They're not confident. And so it's like, it's so funny because I'll get them like, I think like last night we were having some cram sessions and I've got some new players I've never met. And I had to explain to them, be open-minded. There's going to be some other techniques and skills that I'm going to teach you. And how I get through that, because I'm not putting their other coaches down, because I think all skills and all work is good.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to need it. I explain it to them, take that as a tool and put it in your tool pouch. Because at some point, you're going to pull that out and you're going to be glad somebody taught you that. It may not be your desire. You may find yourself that this technique over here is better for you. But there's nothing you're not going to learn that you can't pull out and use one day.
Yeah.
And so I try to get them to understand that and to stay open-minded to new possibilities. I tell them all the time when I'm teaching them that new is awkward because girls don't like to be awkward. Oh my gosh. When you're teaching them a new skill, they will take 20 minutes.
Right.
Trying to prove to them.
It's like self-awareness to a fault.
Trying to prove to them that you can do this. And next thing you know, you've spent 20 minutes proving they could do it.
That's what you're doing is building confidence. Right. And you mentioned a second ago that girls tend to, when they lack confidence, it's a passive posture when they don't feel confident. And I have parents ask me or comment I want my daughter to be more aggressive. It's like, I think you're thinking about this in the wrong way, because aggression is a byproduct of confidence, right? Of decisiveness and boldness, which all comes from confidence. So I think if we can make them confident, then the aggression will follow.
In most cases, I agree with that. I mean, you have some players that are they're just passive, and they're going to be passive the rest of their life. People are going to walk on them for the rest of their life. I mean, you can see that. You can see that pretty early.
Yeah.
And that's what I was talking about earlier was you have to be careful with that as a coach.
Yeah.
Because then you get your A-type coach, and they just don't even realize that they're demolishing this poor child.
Yeah.
They don't even realize it. When all they needed to do was just talk to her normal.
Yeah.
And not be so hard on her. But at the same time, we have to, I feel like if we give them time to for their personalities to start to develop, because
you never know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen players. And what's even funnier is I have so many siblings. I've got players that I have their sisters. And it's the tale that they say is the second one's always more confident, more aggressive. In most cases, it's true. It's funny because I'm like, you are nothing like your sister. Your sister was, she was sweet. I'll joke around with them. She was sweet. She was respectful. And you're over here giving me the eyes. And I'm just like, but I think it's because of years of them growing up in the gym with them. And so they've gotten confident early because they've watched their siblings.
Yeah.
So that first child sometimes is not nearly as confident.
There's so many variables. Like, you don't know, like, they could be late bloomers. They could be physically or personality's a late bloomer.
You also don't know what they're going through at home.
You have no idea, like, how
controlling the parent is. And they don't want to do anything till you tell them to.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make the parent bad. It doesn't make the child bad. But you just don't know what you're dealing with. And so I used to, I'd be like, well, when I was growing up, now I just kind of shake my head and smile and go, okay. And I can start to, with my age, pinpoint players who can't do anything without their parent approval.
Seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, and the parent wants to be in the gym.
Yeah.
Some parents want to be in the gym because they love it. And for me, I would say 90% of my parents, they love the game, but they are friends. It's so funny. Like the player maybe as a junior going into senior year may say, I'm not going to go to college, so I'm not going to play club ball. And the kid's okay with it. The parents are struggling because it's their new friend group. And they're going to miss the travel. And we always tell parents all the time, we're like, listen, the best time you're ever going to have with your child is when you're doing a travel sport, because the quality of time that you get to spend with them is amazing if you'll just take that time and spend it with your child.
Yeah. The leaders' influence, like the director's influence on that environment, the coaches' influence on the environment, the leader on the team, the captain's influence on the environment. The parents have an enormous influence on that environment.
Let me tell you this. I tell all the time, I tell my coaches, we can't defend ourselves at the parents' dinner table.
Yeah.
And so I do ask my parents in meetings to please not discuss stuff and other people's children in front of your child, because they can't defend themselves. Yeah. And so sometimes it happens, but you can tell when the parent talks about everybody, because the disrespect starts happening, and you can see it on the court because there has to be a chemistry. So for me, I tell parents all the time, don't talk about other people's children. Don't talk about the coach. If you have a problem, come talk with us, but don't do it in front of the child.
We've talked about how you develop a leader. And I spend a lot of time thinking, like, why do I spend all of this time on youth sports? Like, why can't I let this go? Why can't I let this go? Like, why does it have a hold on me? Like, what do we achieve? What do we achieve with all this? And as I get older, I think it's one of the most valuable things we can do is teach kids to be a good teammate
and a good human.
Yeah, and good humans can learn to be good teammates, right? But that's not there's a lot to being a good teammate. And hearing you talk, I wonder if the game, like, our role is not just teaching the kids to be good teammates, but maybe the families as well, right? And I wonder how much that healthy environment that you're talking about, that builds confidence, that empowers players, how much of that is how good a teammates this group has learned to be, and being a good teammate it sounds like a small thing, but that's life, right? Like
Yeah.
that might be the secret to life, is learning to be a good teammate.
I agree. I mean, I think it's just a culture and what you choose. For me, I try to make a culture in my club. And if a parent believes, I always kind of giggle and say, if they drink the Kool-Aid,
Yeah.
then they love the experience with me, because I try to teach that. My parents on a whole are wonderful. They get along. They support me. They, they'll come and have talks with me, and I'll try to tell them. And then I've got some parents that no matter what I say, they're not going to believe what I'm doing. But I have to say, I keep doing what I'm doing, and I want to grow it, because I believe that a lot of my parents that believe in extreme, they love it, and they love what I'm doing, and they believe it. Yeah. And I always try to respect them, and I always tell them, I'm approachable. Yeah. But I think that I want to give what I see, the kids that I see in my club, I want to give the parents a big shout out. Yeah. Because a lot of them are great, and the parents do a great job, and they're part of it, and they want to see it. But it's so funny. Like, I've got a couple of teams that the parents are such good friends that I'm almost brokenhearted if I can't keep them all together, because some kids are growing and some kids aren't. Yeah. And what's going to end up happening is the parents are going to be disappointed because they're not with their bestie. It's not even the players. Yeah. And I'm just like, so I try to I'm always the bad person, because they'll be talking and they're real happy, and I look at them, I'm like, well, I mean, she needs to grow. Because if she doesn't grow, she's probably not going to stay with this team. It's
just another thing that it's another thing that we have to balance as coaches, is the individual and the group, right? And that's goes for the families as well.
Well, you're going to have in a team. I'm going to get a team, and the core of them are going to stay together as they come up the ages. Yeah. But then you're going to have some of them that aren't growing. Their skill level is not there. Yeah. But then there's going to be another player whose skill starts the growth. And I'm like, gosh, you're going to fit in perfectly with this team. Yeah. And I think for me,
and they've earned an opportunity, right?
They did. Yeah. And they're actually a better fit. Yeah. Doesn't mean they're a nicer human. Mm-hmm. They're just a better fit. And I have a problem with this. I've got to balance the personal with the business decision, because people are paying. They're not coming here for a rec. This isn't rec ball. Yeah. So I have to also remember that I am trying to put together a power team or a good club team. So I try to put them together per their skill level and the maturity. Yeah. And so I get kind of sometimes in a bad spot. Like, somebody will love me for 3 years, and all of a sudden the fourth year they hate me. Yeah. Because I didn't place them. Yeah. And so I have a tough time balancing that sometimes. Sure. And it's not because I can't do it. Because I do it. It's my own personal feelings. Yeah.
When we were talking earlier, you talked about like the satisfaction you get from your players evolving into coaches. And me myself, like, that's probably at this point in my career the thing I get the most joy and satisfaction from, is seeing a kid that I coached is now coaching. Yep. Right? And like, that's a cultural thing too. So how cool is it to have a club that's large enough that you're seeing the
players are coming back. Yeah. This year alone. Oh my goodness. I mean, I've got so many players that are returning and to coach, and they want to coach. There were some called me, some I called them. Yeah. Because I knew they were in town. Yeah. But it makes me so proud. I mean, I'm looking around, and it's so funny because we tell stories. Oh, let me tell you what she did to me. Yeah. And when I look around and see my players coaching for me, that's like a proud mama moment. Yeah. And I always try not to get too personally involved. And I tell them, sometimes I look at the coaches and they'll do something. I'm like, okay, that hurt me like a mama. Don't do that. And they'll giggle. But I think that's my proudest time, is when they come back and they're coaching and they're good. Yeah. For instance, locally, love watching Tennessee High's coach Carly. She started with us at 13.
Right.
And she's been coaching with me for 5 or 6 years now. And she'll talk to me sometimes and we'll chat. She's like, oh my gosh, what do I do here? And it's not necessarily saying what do I do with the players? It's like, how do I grow?
Yeah.
She's so interested in being a better coach.
Huh. Yeah.
And she's picking my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I love to sit and talk to her. The King coach, Haley, did the same thing when she was young. When she was she was assistant club director with me for a little while. We sit and chat. And now she's had probably more experience in divisions than I have now.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of her.
Yeah.
I see them and I think they know that I truly want them to go on and succeed.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of kids that like the game and a few that love the game. Mm-hmm. And when you're a part of these kids' lives and you see that they love the game as a player, and then as a coach, they love the game even more. Like they're hungry to, just as hungry as a coach to develop into a great coach as they were as a player. Like that's such a cool thing to be a part of.
When I look back over my years of doing this, there's things that I wished that I had done when I was younger, because so many of my, and I don't know that I understood it as much as I do now back then or appreciated it, is that so many players, I was always coaching the highest team. Players worked hard to get to me. They wanted to be picked for my team. And I couldn't coach all of them, even though I wanted to. I can't put 15, 20 girls on my team. There's only 6 on the court.
Right.
And it wasn't fair to them to say, okay, just to be on you could be over here with another good coach and get playing time. And I don't think sometimes that I understood. I mean, I said I did and I did, but I don't know that I really totally always understood how bad it hurt their feelings when they got overlooked for me at 18. And it wasn't because they weren't good enough. It was either this chemistry of this team was be good. I think this coach would be better for you. Not that I don't love you, but I don't want to ruin the sport for you because I was tough. So in the last couple of years, I've started coaching 2 teams. And they usually are the upper teams, because so many girls are trying to make it to me. Their end result is to make it on my team.
Yeah.
Because they're playing in my club.
Yeah.
And so I wished years ago I had coached 2 18 teams and just said, your schedule's going to be every other weekend. Because I can't tell you how many girls left the club and never got that opportunity to play for me.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of them coming back this year. Well, I've got one that's been with me for 4 or 5 years coaching. Carly never played on my immediate team, but I always did lessons. I always helped them.
Yeah.
And I've got some more coming back this year. And I think that is even a lot more special to me when it didn't ruin the relationship because it didn't play particularly for me.
Yeah.
And so I wish I would have gone back, and I wish I would have coached more than one team. I just didn't know I could do it. It didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
And so I would apologize to them. If they came to me, I would say, I'm so sorry I didn't think about this earlier.
Yeah.
Because I would have loved to coach you. Because how many walked off thinking I didn't want to coach them?
Yeah.
And and that breaks my heart.
Yeah. Well, I think it says a lot about you that your regret is that you didn't coach more.
Yes.
I think that says a lot about you and how much you love the game.
Yeah.
And it's always inspiring to be around people who truly. There's a lot of people that like a game. It's inspiring to me to be around people who love the game.
And you know what? Not just that, but my parents.
Yeah.
I have parents helping me. Like my right hand is Lisa. Her daughter played for me years. She was team mom for years. Her daughter's now coaching for me. She has for 5 years. Lisa's still with me. She's like, I think you met her. She joked
Yeah.
and said, I'm a parent, never left. And then I've got another one whose daughter who just went to college, and he's still helping me on stuff. I've had coaches. I had them coach
Yeah.
for me. And I have parents all the time offer me. I've got parents coming to tryouts. Their kids have already graduated. They just want to come help with paperwork. And I think that's huge. I think that's neat when they're like, we don't want to leave the club.
Well, it becomes more than volleyball, right? Or it becomes more
family.
When I think success for something like this is when it does become more than that team, and it's a community that becomes bigger than the sport, right?
Yeah.
And so it's awesome to see how you've done this, how you continue to do it, and that your regret is that you haven't done more.
Well, I will tell you this. One more thing that I love is I've got a lot of coaches who have children.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that they're in the club playing.
Yeah, I do too. It makes me feel just a little bit old to see my
when you get your players to have their children.
It's like now I've got kids that I started coaching when they were like 6.
Yes.
And now they've got kids.
I'm in the same situation. I'm like, they're bringing them in. They're like, I had one. It was so cute. I had one the other day text me. She started doing some lessons with us.
Yeah.
And her first one was with Marky, who's amazing. And she's like, are we going to see you soon? Because she wants to follow the same steps that I did. She wants to meet you. And I'm like, of course. And I just couldn't do it right that day. And that was her only day she could do lessons. And I thought that was so sweet.
Yeah.
I'm like, of course I will do lessons with her, because she said, I've told her all about you.
And
I'm like, oh my gosh, and it broke my heart. And I'm just like, oh, sorry, I just couldn't do it that day. And so it was so cute. But I love when they come back and they play for me and they bring their children.
Yeah. Well, that's when you know that you built a culture that's bigger than yourself.
I have coaches. I have players that played with my daughter that are coaching, but I also now have. My daughter's going to be coaching with coaches that coached her. Yeah. And I think that's really cool. Yeah. Too. Yeah. So that was really neat. So like Haley's coached my daughter already. And it was so cute because she's like, well, your mama coached me and now I'm coaching you. And I thought that was fun. Yeah. So.
Well, thanks so much for being on.
Oh, it was so much fun.
It was great learning about volleyball and how you're leading and how you're teaching kids to lead. And
well, I think you're going to get to see a lot more.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. And I thank you for everything that you're doing for us too.
All right. Thanks.